It's Halloween, 1348. Across Europe, the air grows cold. The shadows lengthen, and the familiar tolling of church bells echoes through cobblestone streets. But this year, the bells don't just call the faithful to prayer. They toll for the dead. And they toll constantly. On this All Hallows Eve, the ghouls and goblins of folklore are the least of anyone's worries. The real monster isn't hiding under the bed or lurking in the forest. It's invisible, silent, and it's already inside the city walls. It travels in the air, on the clothes of merchants, in the fur of rats scuttling through the alleyways. They call it the Great Pestilence. We call it the Black Death. This isn't a ghost story. This is the story of a Halloween when death itself came trick-or-treating, and it took everything. Our story begins not in a haunted castle, but on a bustling dock. In October of 1348, ships from Calais, France, arrive on the southern coast of England. They carry wine, cloth, and a cargo far more sinister. Within days of their arrival, the port towns are gripped by a terrifying new sickness. Eyewitness accounts, like those chronicled by monks of the era, paint a horrifying picture. It starts with a fever and aches, nothing too unusual. But then, the dreaded signs appear. Painful, black swellings, called buboes, erupt in the groin and armpits, some growing to the size of an apple. Then come the dark blotches on the skin, a sign of internal bleeding, which gave the plague its grim name, the Black Death. In its most virulent form, the pneumonic plague, it attacks the lungs. Victims cough up blood, and death can come in less than 2 days. Imagine the sheer panic. This isn't a battle you can fight with a sword. It's a phantom enemy. Your neighbor, who seemed healthy yesterday, is gone by morning. Entire families are sealed inside their homes, left to perish together. The Italian writer Giovanni Boccaccio described the scene in Florence just a year earlier. The condition of the people was pitiable to behold. They sickened by the thousands daily and died unattended and without help. Many died in the open street, others dying in their houses, made it known by the stench of their rotting bodies. This same nightmare was now unfolding in England. As Halloween approaches, a time traditionally meant to honor the saints and remember the souls of the departed, the line between the living and the dead blurs into a terrifying haze. In towns and villages, the local clergy, the pillars of the community, try to fight back with the only weapons they have: faith and ritual. On All Hallows Eve, desperate processions snake through the streets. Priests in their finest vestments lead the way, holding aloft crosses and holy relics. The terrified populace follows, chanting prayers, their faces illuminated by candlelight. They believe the plague is a punishment from God, a divine scourge for humanity's sins. They pray for mercy, for a sign, for the saints to intercede on their behalf and ward off this great evil. But the plague is indifferent to prayer. The very act of gathering to seek divine help becomes a death sentence. The close-packed crowds are a perfect breeding ground for the disease. The priest who led the procession, who offered comfort and final rites to the dying, would himself be dead within a week. The faithful, who knelt beside him in prayer, would soon follow. The holy water and incense couldn't stop an enemy they couldn't see. Faith was being tested in the cruelest way imaginable. God, it seemed to many, had turned his back on the world. In London, the situation becomes apocalyptic. The city, a crowded and sanitary maze of narrow streets, is a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The plague ignites it into an inferno of death. At first, the churchyards handle the burials. But soon, they are overwhelmed. There isn't enough consecrated ground to hold the dead. Churchyards like St. Mary's and St. Paul's are filled to capacity, with bodies buried in shallow graves, sometimes 5 or 6 deep. The city authorities are forced to take drastic measures. Outside the city walls, in a place called East Smithfield, they purchase a plot of land for a new emergency cemetery. It becomes known as the Plague Pit. Day and night, carts creak through the streets, piled high with the dead. The carter's call, "Bring out your dead," becomes a dreadful soundtrack to daily life. There's no time for proper funerals, for individual goodbyes. Bodies are tipped into massive trenches, unceremoniously, rich and poor, old and young, all equal in death. The social fabric unravels. People abandon their families. Parents refuse to care for their sick children. Children flee their dying parents. The living become obsessed with their own survival. Many turn to a morbid kind of hedonism, believing their days are numbered anyway. They spend their savings on drink and revelry, trying to forget the horror surrounding them. Others lock themselves away, becoming hermits in their own homes, hoping to wait out the storm. For those who survive, the psychological toll is immense. They are living in a world of ghosts. They walk streets once filled with friends and neighbors, now early silent. They are the sole survivors of their families, left to dig graves for their own children, their own spouses. Agnolo de Toro, a chronicler from Siena, Italy, wrote a heartbreakingly personal account that captures this despair. I, Agnolo de Toro, buried my 5 children with my own hands. And so many died that all believed it was the end of the world. This was the reality for millions across the continent. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death swept through Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. Historians estimate that it wiped out between 30 to 60% of Europe's population. That's up to 50 million people. In some cities, the death toll was as high as 75 or 80%. It was the single greatest catastrophe in recorded history, a demographic collapse on a scale never seen before or since. So, let us return to that one terrifying Halloween night in 1348. The candles that were traditionally lit to honor the saints and guide the souls of the faithful in purgatory now burned for a different reason. They were lit in memory of the freshly dead, whose numbers were growing by the hour. The jack-o'-lanterns we carve today have their origins in folklore about warding off wandering spirits. But on that night, the real fear wasn't of spirits, it was of becoming one. The Black Death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a turning point. The world that emerged from its shadow was profoundly different. The sheer scale of the death toll had massive, unforeseen consequences. With so many workers gone, the rigid feudal system that had dominated Europe for centuries began to crack. Labor was suddenly in high demand. Peasants and serfs, who were once tied to the land, could now demand higher wages and better conditions. Many abandoned their old lords and sought new opportunities, leading to greater social mobility and the gradual decline of serfdom. It was a brutal, unintentional catalyst for economic revolution. Medicine also underwent a radical transformation. The old methods, based on superstition and the balancing of humors, had proven utterly useless against the plague. The failure of traditional doctors forced a new generation to look for answers based on observation and evidence, not just ancient texts. This laid the groundwork for the development of modern medical science and public health. Concepts like quarantine, first implemented in Italian port cities, became a standard practice for controlling disease. Faith and the church were forever changed. The institution's inability to stop the plague or even explain it convincingly shook the foundations of its authority. Many people lost faith in the established clergy who had died alongside them. This disillusionment fueled a rise in new, more personal forms of religious expression and contributed to the currents of dissent that would eventually lead to the Protestant Reformation a century and a half later. And finally, the plague reshaped how people thought about life and death itself. Art and literature became obsessed with mortality. The dance macabre, or dance of death, became a common artistic theme, depicting skeletons leading people from all walks of life, popes, kings, peasants to their graves. It was a stark reminder that death is the great equalizer. This obsession with the finite nature of life also, paradoxically, led to a celebration of it. The survivors, having stared into the abyss, developed a new appreciation for the world, for beauty, and for human achievement. This cultural shift helped plant the seeds for the incredible flourishing of art and science that we now call the Renaissance. So, when the Halloween decorations come out this year, and we tell ghost stories by candlelight, remember the Halloween of 1348. Remember a time when the monster was real, when the world held its breath, and when the survivors of an unimaginable horror were left to rebuild a new world from the ashes of the old. The Black Death was more than a plague. It was a fire that burned away an old era and, in doing so, forged the beginnings of our own. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into history as fascinating as I did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.